First class. Someone like you. I don't think so, honey. Economy's at the back of the line. These words rang out across Gate B12 of Harrison International Airport, causing nearby passengers to look up from their phones, confused and uncomfortable. The voice belonged to Gary Price, a gate agent, a 40-something man with a Summit Airlines uniform stretched tight around his midsection, looking down at the woman before him with undisguised contempt. The woman, Amara Vance, stood motionless, her expression unchanged, still holding her first-class ticket and passport. She wore a simple gray hoodie and black joggers, looking like any ordinary traveler. But in exactly 7 minutes, this woman would show Gary Price the most catastrophic mistake of his career. Because Amara Vance wasn't just a regular passenger, she was the new executive director of the entire Harrison Airport Authority. The relentless echoing chime of a PA system announcement bled into the sterile air of Harrison International Airport. Terminal B was a river of human anxiety, a place where time simultaneously dragged and sprinted. For Amara, it was just home, or rather her new, sprawling, impossibly complex workplace. At 42, she had just been appointed as Director of Operations for the entire Harrison Airport Authority, a position that made her one of the most powerful women in civil aviation. But tonight, she wasn't Director Vance. She was just Amara. She had deliberately chosen comfortable clothing for this late flight, the hood of her sweatshirt pulled down, her hair pulled back in a neat bun. It was 8:00 p.m. on a Thursday, and she was flying to a transport symposium in London. She could have used the private executive hangar. She could have been driven to the aircraft in a black car with tinted windows. But Amara had built her career on one principle. You can't manage what you don't experience yourself from the ground level, and the ground level for an airport was Gate B12. On the monitor behind Gary, a countdown clock was running 14:27 until the doors closed. Each second that passed seemed to increase Gary's arrogance. When Gary's gaze first caught her standing in line, Amara saw it. That flicker of judgment, the immediate sizing up that had nothing to do with her ticket and everything to do with her appearance. She had seen it countless times before, but this time she was prepared to observe it as a case study in the exact problem she'd been hired to fix. As Gary Price scanned the first-class ticket Amara had placed on the counter, his eyebrows arched high enough to create wrinkles across his forehead. "First class to London," he said, his voice deliberately loud enough for nearby passengers to hear. "There must be some mistake." "No mistake," Amara replied calmly. "Seat 2A. I've had it reserved for weeks." Gary held the ticket between his thumb and forefinger as if it might be contaminated. He looked at her passport photo, a professional headshot of Amara in business attire, then back at the woman in casual clothes standing before him. "You understand this is a first-class ticket?" he asked, emphasizing first class as if explaining a complex concept to a child. "The premium cabin, at the front of the plane." Around them, the last few business-class passengers were boarding, casting curious glances at the exchange. A middle-aged woman in a cashmere wrap, Beatrice, slowed her pace, clearly eavesdropping. Amara nodded once. "I'm aware. I've flown first class before." Gary's mouth twisted into something between a smirk and a sneer. "Not on my watch," he muttered, just loud enough for Amara to hear. "Then louder for the benefit of onlookers, I need to verify this reservation. It's flagging in our system." "My reservation is confirmed," Amara said evenly. "Perhaps you'd like to check again." Gary scoffed his fingers, making an exaggerated show of typing into his terminal. "Well, our system says otherwise. Your ticket is showing as invalid." He slid the passport and ticket back across the counter with a dismissive flick of his wrist. "Next passenger, please." Amara didn't move. "The ticket is valid. I checked in online 2 hours ago." "Ma'am," Gary said, the false courtesy in his voice barely masking his irritation. "I'm going to have to ask you to step aside. There are real first-class passengers waiting to board." From a few feet away, a young woman with vibrant red hair, Maya Chen, a travel vlogger with over 2 million followers, had noticed the tension building. She quietly took out her phone and began recording. Live streaming from Gate B12, she whispered into her microphone. "I think we're witnessing blatant discrimination happening right now." A middle-aged man in a business blazer sighed. "She's causing trouble," he mumbled just loud enough to be heard, rolling his eyes toward Amara. "If she wants to fly first class, maybe she should dress the part." But a college student nearby disagreed. "Are you kidding me? Her ticket is valid. You can see the colors on it from here." Maya continued filming, zooming in on the way Gary held Amara's passport on the contemptuous expression on his face. The viewership on her live stream began to spike 100, 500, 200. Comments started pouring in rapidly. "Oh no, another Gary Gate. Someone needs to tell him it's 2025. We've sent rockets to Mars, but we still have to deal with this." As Gary's dismissive words hung in the air, a memory flashed through Amara's mind. She was 26, fresh out of her MBA program, waiting at another airport. She wore her first ever business suit purchased with her first real paycheck. Brand new high heels cut into her ankles. She was on her way to her first interview with the Civil Aviation Authority. "First class check-in is over there," the agent at the counter said, without looking up, pointing as soon as Amara approached. "This is the priority line." "I know," Amara had replied. "I have a first-class ticket." The man finally looked up, his eyes scanning her from head to toe. "You're sure about that?" he asked, skepticism dripping from every word. Amara had handed him her ticket, and he had reluctantly accepted it, but the humiliation lingered. That day, during her interview, when asked about her vision for aviation, she had answered, "Imagine an airport where no one has to prove they belong." Now, 16 years later, the same script was playing out again. But this time, Amara was no longer someone who needed to prove herself. She had spent the last decade and a half climbing through the ranks of airport management, starting as an operations analyst at a small regional airport, then managing terminal operations at Chicago O'Hare, before being headhunted for the director position at Harrison International. Her appointment had made headlines in the aviation industry, the first black woman to lead one of America's busiest international hubs. Her predecessor had retired under a cloud of complaints about passenger experience and staff morale. The board had chosen Amara specifically for her reputation for transforming workplace culture while maintaining operational excellence. "We need someone who can see problems that others miss," the board chair had told her during her final interview. And here was precisely such a problem playing out in real time. Gary Price had been working for Summit Airlines for 22 years. He had started as a baggage handler, then worked as a check-in agent before finally achieving his current position at the gate. To Gary, this wasn't just a job. It was a kingdom. The gate podium was his throne, the boarding process his royal ceremony. The power to decide who was worthy of boarding first had over time corrupted his perspective. He had developed a mental image of what a real first-class passenger looked like, and Amara Vance in her hoodie and joggers didn't fit that image. What Gary didn't know was that Amara had deliberately chosen to fly commercial tonight, rather than use the executive privileges at her disposal. She had planned this trip weeks ago as her first undercover assessment of the actual passenger experience at Harrison. She wanted to feel the real pressure points, the understaffed security lines, the confusing signage, the inconsistent Wi-Fi, and apparently the discriminatory gate agents. 1402, 1401, 1400. Amara glanced at her watch. She knew the procedure well. The doors would close in 14 minutes. For an ordinary passenger, this would be a moment of stress, a moment of desperation. Gary was counting on that pressure. But Amara wasn't an ordinary passenger. She didn't need to rush. "I have all the time in the world, Mr. Price," she said, her voice steady. Gary's expression tightened. "Ma'am, you're holding up the entire boarding process. Either move aside or I'll have to call security. People try this all the time." He continued, raising his voice for the benefit of those around them. They find a way to book premium tickets through third-party sites, show up thinking they'll be treated like royalty. It doesn't work that way. Amara looked straight into Gary's eyes, her voice gentle but clear as steel. Those with real power never need to prove it. They just wait until others realize their mistake. The statement confused Gary momentarily, but he quickly recovered. "Security?" he called out, gesturing to an officer standing near the jet bridge entrance. "We have a situation here." Officer Dunn, a serious man in his 30s with a clean-shaven head, approached cautiously. "What seems to be the problem?" "This passenger." Gary emphasized the word with subtle disdain, is attempting to board with what appears to be a fraudulent first-class ticket. "She's refusing to step aside." Officer Dunn turned to Amara. "Ma'am, can I see your identification and ticket, please?" Amara calmly handed over her passport and ticket again. "Of course. Officer Dunn," she said, noting his name badge. "I understand you're just doing your job." There was something in her composure that made Officer Dunn pause. Most confrontational passengers displayed anxiety or anger. This woman showed neither. 12:33. 12:32. 12:31. The security officer was checking his tablet, comparing Amara's ID with database information. Gary grew impatient, glancing at the clock. "We're delaying the entire flight," he urged. "Make a decision. Now. 10:09. 10:08. 10:07. A crowd was gathering. Maya was live streaming. Beatrice was shaking her head in disapproval. It was now a performance, and Gary was using the clock as a weapon. "Just 10 minutes left," he announced to the crowd. "We have a schedule to maintain." The confrontation at Gate B12 was no longer a private matter. Every word exchanged between Gary Price and Amara Vance now had an audience both in the terminal and online through Maya Chen's live stream. "She's standing her ground." Maya narrated quietly into her phone. "The gate agent is clearly making assumptions based on how she's dressed." The live stream's viewership had now crossed 5,000 and was climbing rapidly. Comments flooded the feed. "This is why I always dress up for flights, even when I don't want to. That gate agent is on a power trip. Someone should step in and help her." Officer Dunn was still reviewing Amara's documentation, looking increasingly puzzled. He tapped something on his tablet, then looked up at Gary. "The system shows the ticket is valid, Mr. Price. The reservation is confirmed in first class." Gary's face flushed red. "That's impossible. Check again. There must be an error." "I've checked twice," Officer Dunn replied firmly. "The ticket is legitimate." Gary leaned over to look at the officer's tablet, then shook his head stubbornly. "Our system is showing differently, and as the authorized gate agent for this flight, I make the final determination." Beatrice, the woman in the cashmere wrap, stepped forward. "Excuse me," she said with the confidence of someone accustomed to being heard, "but isn't Summit Airlines' policy to honor valid tickets?" "If her reservation is in the system." Gary cut her off. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this is an airline matter. We have procedures." Amara watched this exchange with calm interest. She was mentally cataloging every violation of company policy, every opportunity for de-escalation that Gary was deliberately ignoring. By now, several more passengers had paused to observe the situation. Some had their phones out recording. Others whispered among themselves. A few looked uncomfortable but remained silent, that peculiar bystander paralysis taking hold. A businessman with a Summit Airlines Platinum card hanging from his briefcase stepped forward. "I fly this route every month," he said firmly. "I've never seen a situation handled this poorly. She has a valid ticket. Let her board." Gary's face contorted with barely contained rage, but he maintained a veneer of professional courtesy. "Sir, I appreciate your loyalty to Summit, but we have a security protocol we must follow when tickets show irregularities." What irregularities? The businessman challenged. The security officer just confirmed her ticket is valid. 7:45, 7:44, 7:43. Officer Dunn was examining Amara's passport for a second time, confusion evident on his face. He looked up and down between the official photo and the woman before him. Meanwhile, Maya's live stream had now caught the attention of several travel journalists and civil rights advocates. Screenshots were being shared across platforms. The hashtag Harrison Airport Bias was beginning to trend locally. He keeps insisting her ticket isn't valid. Maya whispered into her live stream, but the security officer already confirmed it is. This is clearly about something else. A young black woman with a toddler approached Amara and quietly said, "This happened to me last month at a different gate. I didn't have the courage to stand my ground like you're doing. Thank you." Amara gave her a subtle nod of acknowledgement. The confrontation was now creating a clear divide among the waiting passengers. Some sided with Gary, impatient to board and viewing Amara as a disruption. Others were becoming increasingly uncomfortable with what they were witnessing, recognizing the discrimination unfolding before them. 5:16, 5:15, 5:14. "Time's running out," Gary declared, a victorious smile on his face. "We need to close the doors. You've wasted everyone's time." Amara remained unruffled. When she spoke, her voice was so calm that people leaned in to hear. "Sometimes, Mr. Price, the most expensive lessons are the ones we pay for ourselves." Gary's brow furrowed, not fully grasping her meaning. Officer Dunn completed his check and turned to Gary. "There's no issue with her documentation. According to the Summit Airlines system, she is confirmed in Seat 2A. "That's impossible," Gary insisted. "Check again. There must be something we're missing." "I've checked 3 times," Officer Dunn replied, his patience visibly wearing thin. "The reservation is legitimate. Then there's been a security breach in our booking system," Gary declared dramatically. "We can't risk allowing a potentially fraudulent passenger on board. We'll need to deny boarding pending a full investigation." The college student who had spoken up earlier couldn't contain himself any longer. "That's absurd. You're just making up reasons now because you can't admit you were wrong." Beatrice nodded in agreement. "This is disgraceful. I've been flying Summit for 20 years and I've never seen anything like this." Gary ignored them, turning to Officer Dunn. "As a security matter, I'm requesting that you escort this passenger from the gate area." Officer Dunn hesitated, glancing between Gary and Amara. Something wasn't adding up, and his instincts as a security professional were sending warning signals. "Mr. Price, I don't see any legitimate security concern here. Are you refusing to do your job?" Gary challenged. "I'm doing my job," Officer Dunn replied firmly, "part of which is using proper judgment." 3:59, 3:58, 3:57. Just then, a notification chimed on Officer Dunn's tablet. He looked down, his eyes widening slightly, as he read whatever had appeared on his screen. He looked up at Amara with newfound recognition. "Ma'am, he began, but Amara subtly shook her head, stopping him mid-sentence. Gary, sensing he was losing control of the situation, made one last desperate attempt. He reached across the counter and physically took Amara's ticket and passport. "This needs to be verified by my supervisor. Please step aside or I'll have you removed from the airport entirely." Gasps erupted from the onlookers. Maya zoomed in with her camera. "He just took her documents," she exclaimed on the live stream. "That's illegal." The businessman stepped forward angrily. "That's theft. You cannot take a passenger's passport." Amara's expression remained unchanged, but her voice took on a new edge of authority. "Mr. Price, you have exactly 10 seconds to return my passport before you commit a federal offense." Gary faltered momentarily, then doubled down. "I'm securing potentially fraudulent documentation. It's within my authority." It's really not came a new voice. A young man in a Summit Airlines pilot uniform had approached, having observed the latter part of the confrontation. Gary returned the lady's documents immediately. Captain Hayes. Gary acknowledged his confidence, wavering slightly. This passenger is attempting to board with a suspicious ticket. I heard Officer Dunn confirm the ticket is valid. Captain Hayes replied coolly. Return her documents now. 10-059, 058. At that moment, a synchronized alert chimed on Gary's phone. Captain Hayes's tablet and all Summit Airlines employee devices within a 50-foot radius. An emergency notification. Attention Executive Director Amara Vance is conducting an unannounced inspection in the Gate B area. All staff on alert. Gary stared at his phone, then up at Amara, the color draining from his face. A Summit Airlines employee behind the counter gasped audibly. Oh my God, it's her! On the large screen above the counter, which typically displayed flight information, now showed Amara Vance's official portrait alongside the announcement, Welcome Executive Director, Vance, leader of the Harrison Airport Authority. The news rippled through the gate area like a shockwave. Waiting passengers began to stare, some recognizing her and pointing. A cleaning staff member stopped his cart, jaw-dropping. The older couple nearby were whispering and aiming their phone cameras toward the scene. No, Gary whispered, his voice now just a whimper. It can't be. Yes, Mr. Price, Amara said finally, allowing herself a small smile. I am Amara Vance, and this is my airport. The transformation was instant and electric. The gate area fell into a stunned silence, broken only by the persistent airport announcements overhead and the furious clicking of phone cameras. Gary Price stood frozen behind the counter. Amara's passport and ticket still clutched in his trembling hand. His face had turned an ashen gray, his earlier confidence evaporated like morning dew under a harsh sun. I didn't... He stammered, unable to complete a coherent thought. You didn't know who I was? Amara finished for him, her voice now carrying a quiet authority that needed no amplification. That's precisely the point, Mr. Price. No passenger should be treated differently based on how they look or what they're wearing. Captain Hayes extended his hand toward Gary. The passenger's documents, please. Mechanically, Gary relinquished the passport and ticket. Captain Hayes returned them to Amara with a respectful nod. My sincere apologies, Director Vance. Thank you. Captain Amara replied, accepting her documents. But I'm not the one who deserves an apology. She turned to address the gathered crowd, many of whom were still recording. Every passenger deserves respect. Every valid ticket deserves to be honored. These aren't courtesies. They're basic expectations. Officer Dunn stepped forward. Director Vance. I need to acknowledge my role in this situation. I should have intervened more decisively. We'll discuss that later. Officer Dunn. Amara said with a nod. Right now, I believe we have a plane to board. Richard Sterling, CEO of Summit Airlines, had been waiting in the first-class lounge for Amara. Alerted by the commotion, he now approached the gate, his expression a mixture of concern and embarrassment. Amara, he said, foregoing formalities. I've just been informed. This is inexcusable. It's actually quite explicable, Richard Amara replied calmly. This is exactly why I chose to experience your airline as an ordinary passenger. She gestured toward Gary, who remained frozen behind the counter. Mr. Price here has demonstrated a problem that exists beyond just one employee or one airline. It's a culture that's been allowed to take root. Richard nodded grimly. Gary Price is suspended effective immediately. Suspended, questioned Maya Chen, still live streaming. Is that really sufficient? Richard turned toward the young vlogger, clearly uncomfortable with the public nature of this confrontation. Company policy requires an investigation before termination, but I assure you, Amara interrupted gently. Richard, let me be clear. This isn't about punishing one employee. This is about changing a culture. Mr. Price is a symptom, not the disease. She turned to Gary, who had finally found his voice again. Director Vance, he said. desperation evident in his tone. I was just following protocol. If a ticket appears suspicious— My ticket didn't appear suspicious, Amara countered evenly. I was confirmed in your system as Officer Dunn verified multiple times. What appeared suspicious to you, Mr. Price, was me. A black woman in casual clothes holding a first-class ticket. Gary's face flushed. That's not true. I would have questioned anyone whose appearance didn't match. He stopped abruptly, realizing too late the damning nature of what he was about to say. Didn't match what Mr. Price Amara pressed. Your personal image of who belongs in first class. The crowd had grown larger now. Summit Airlines staff from nearby gates had gathered watching in silent horror as one of their colleagues imploded his career in real time. Richard Sterling cleared his throat. Gary, please report to HR immediately. Someone will escort you. A Summit Airlines manager appeared as if summoned ready to lead Gary away, but before he could leave, Amara addressed him one final time. When something's wrong, speak clearly and stand still, she said, echoing words her father had taught her decades ago. Today I was a woman in a hoodie denied her rightful seat on a plane. Tomorrow I will still be the executive director of this airport. And you, Mr. Price, tomorrow who will you be? Gary had no answer. He was led away, his shoulders slumped, his 22-year career effectively ended by 7 minutes of revealed prejudice. As Gary disappeared down the concourse, Richard turned to Amara. I'd like to offer my personal apology and assurance that Summit Airlines does not condone save the press release. Richard, Amara said, not unkindly. What I need from Summit isn't words. It's action, and it starts with acknowledging that what happened here isn't isolated. She gestured to the young black mother with the toddler who had spoken to her earlier. This passenger just told me she experienced similar treatment last month. How many others have walked away humiliated, too afraid, or too tired to stand their ground? Richard looked genuinely troubled. What are you proposing? A complete overhaul, Amara replied. Starting tomorrow, I'll have my team contact yours with details. For now, I believe we have a flight to London to catch. The gate area erupted in spontaneous applause. Maya Chen ended her live stream with a triumphant justice served at Gate B12 Harrison International Airport. As Amara finally moved toward the jet bridge, passengers reached out to shake her hand or simply nod in respect. The college student who had spoken up gave her a thumbs up. Beatrice, the woman in the cashmere wrap, approached hesitantly. I should have said something sooner. She admitted genuine regret in her voice. Next time you will, Amara replied with a gentle smile. That's how change happens. Captain Hayes personally escorted Amara to her seat 2A, which had been waiting for her all along. As she settled in, her phone buzzed with a text from her assistant. Your video's going viral. 100K views already. Harrison Director and Hashar First Class Justice are trending. Amara put her phone on airplane mode and looked out the window at her airport, because it was indeed hers now, in a way it hadn't been before tonight. She had seen its flaws exposed in the harsh light of prejudice, and now she had the moral authority to demand real change. The flight to London would take 7 hours. She had 7 hours to draft what would soon be known as the Gate B12 Initiative. By the time flight SA-7701 reached cruising altitude over the Atlantic, the video of what had transpired at Gate B12 had exceeded 1 million views across multiple platforms. News outlets had picked up the story, running headlines like, Airport Director Denied Boarding at Her Own Airport, and Harrison International's new boss experiences discrimination firsthand. Richard Sterling, seated across the aisle from Amara in 1A, looked as though he'd aged 5 years in the past hour. The board is in emergency session, he said quietly, showing her his tablet. They're demanding immediate action. As they should, Amara replied, not unkindly, but the action needs to be meaningful, not just performative. Richard nodded solemnly. I agree. This is a wake-up call for Summit. For all of us. While Richard dealt with the corporate fallout, Amara opened her laptop and began drafting what would become the framework for the Gate B12 Initiative. It wasn't just about punishing one gate agent or implementing another sensitivity training program that would be forgotten within weeks. This was about fundamental change in how the airport operated, how staff were trained, and how success was measured. Back at Harrison International, the consequences were already unfolding. Gary Price had been escorted to Human Resources, where he was officially suspended pending investigation. But everyone knew, including Gary himself, that his career with Summit Airlines was over. As he sat in a sterile conference room waiting for the paperwork that would send him home, his phone buzzed incessantly with notifications. Friends and colleagues had seen the video. His wife had called 4 times. His face was all over social media. "I wasn't being racist," he muttered to himself. "I was just doing my job." But even as he formed these words, a small voice in the back of his mind questioned, would he have treated a white man in a business suit the same way? Deep down, he knew the answer. Meanwhile, Officer Dunn had been called into his supervisor's office. He expected to be reprimanded, possibly even suspended for his handling of the situation. Instead, he found both his supervisor and the head of airport security waiting for him. Director Vance called his supervisor, said without preamble, "She wants you to lead a new training initiative." Dunn blinked in surprise. "Me? But I didn't handle the situation properly. I should have intervened sooner." "That's exactly why she wants you," the head of security explained. "She said you showed good judgment eventually, but the hesitation is what we need to address system-wide. She believes you understand the problem from the inside." Across the terminal, Maya Chen was finishing a follow-up video. Her follower count had jumped by 50,000 in the past 2 hours, but she wasn't focused on the numbers. "This isn't about one viral moment," she explained to her audience. "This is about a pattern that happens every day in airports, hotels, and businesses across the country. Today, it happened to someone with the power to change it." The consequences rippled beyond Harrison International. Other airlines began hastily reviewing their customer service policies. Other airports launched internal assessments of their own staff training programs. No one wanted to be the next viral example of discrimination. But perhaps the most significant immediate change was happening among the passengers who had witnessed the incident. The young black mother who had spoken to Amara had posted her own account online describing how validating it felt to see someone stand up to the treatment she had silently endured. The college student had started a thread about bystander intervention, prompting thousands of responses from people sharing times they wished they'd spoken up against injustice. Even Beatrice, the woman in the cashmere wrap, had been affected. During her connecting flight to Paris, she found herself more aware of how airline staff treated different passengers. She noticed subtle differences in tone, in helpfulness, in the benefit of the doubt extended to some, but not others. For the first time, she was truly seeing the invisible barriers that had always been transparent to her, but solid to others. By the time Amara landed at Heathrow Airport in London, her inbox contained over 5,000 emails, from airport employees, from passengers sharing similar experiences, from civil rights organizations offering support, and from other airport directors asking for guidance. One email in particular caught her attention. It was from Jennifer Price Gary's wife. "Director Vance," it began. "By now you know my husband is the man who tried to deny you boarding. I don't defend what he did. But I want you to know that Gary wasn't always like this. 20 years in a system that rewarded him for being the gatekeeper for exercising power over others changed him. Please understand, I'm not asking for his job back. That ship has sailed. I'm asking you to look deeper than one man's actions to the culture that shaped him. Fix that, and you'll prevent 1,000 future Gary Prices." Amara read the email twice, then forwarded it to her assistant with a note. "Invite Mrs. Price to meet with me when I return. She understands the problem better than most." The Transport Symposium in London had originally been just another industry event on Amara's calendar. Now it became a platform. The organizers, aware of what had happened, asked if she would be willing to address it during her scheduled presentation on passenger experience innovation. Standing before a room of aviation industry leaders, Amara began with a simple statement. 2 days ago, I was deemed unworthy of the seat I had purchased because I didn't look the part. Today, I'm here to tell you that this isn't just about one incident or one airport. It's about an industry that has confused authority with service power, with purpose. The room was silent as she continued. The Gate B12 initiative that I'm launching isn't just about sensitivity training or diversity metrics. It's about redefining what airports are for. They're not fortresses to be guarded. They're gateways to be opened. They're not kingdoms for petty tyrants. They're crossroads for human connection. As she outlined the specific components of her initiative, the comprehensive staff retraining, the real-time feedback system, the mystery passenger program, the reversal of incentive structures that rewarded rigid rule enforcement over compassionate problem-solving, the audience began to understand that this wasn't just a reaction to a PR crisis. This was a vision that Amara had been developing throughout her career, now catalyzed by personal experience. Harrison International will become a model for what airports can be, she concluded. Not because we're perfect, we clearly aren't, but because we're willing to face our flaws honestly and address them completely. The standing ovation that followed wasn't just for her speech. It was an acknowledgement that she had articulated something many of them had sensed, but never confronted, that the aviation industry had developed a culture that too often prioritized process over people, rules over respect. 3 days later, when Amara returned to Harrison International, she didn't use the executive entrance. She walked through the main terminal wearing the same gray hoodie she'd worn on her outbound journey. But this time, something was different. Staff who recognized her stopped to greet her respectfully. Passengers who had seen the video asked for selfies. And as she passed Gate B12, she noticed a small but significant change. The gate agent, a young woman named Tasha, was greeting each passenger with genuine eye contact and a warm smile, regardless of their appearance or ticket class. It was a small beginning, but it was a beginning nonetheless. The Gate B12 Initiative wasn't just a policy document. It was a comprehensive reimagining of how Harrison International Airport functioned. Amara had spent her 7-hour flight to London drafting the framework, and the week following her return was dedicated to developing it into a full-scale implementation plan. On a Monday morning, 2 weeks after the incident, Amara gathered the entire airport leadership team in the main conference room. Division heads from security operations, maintenance, customer service, and representatives from every airline operating at Harrison sat around the large oval table, expressions ranging from curious to apprehensive. What happened at Gate B12 wasn't an isolated incident. Amara began standing at the head of the table. It was a symptom of a deeper problem, a culture that has lost sight of why we exist in the first place. She clicked a button and the large screen behind her displayed a simple question: what is an airport for? The room fell silent as executives exchanged uncertain glances. It's a transportation hub, offered the operations director after a moment. A crucial economic driver, added the finance executive. A security checkpoint, said the head of TSA. Amara nodded at each response. Those are all true, but their function's not purpose. An airport's purpose is to connect people, to destinations, to opportunities, to loved ones. Everything we do should serve that purpose with dignity and respect for every traveler. She clicked to the next slide, which outlined the 5 pillars of the Gate B12 Initiative. Comprehensive experience assessment. Every staff member, regardless of position, would experience the airport as a passenger quarterly, from parking to gate, as a mystery passenger documenting pain points and areas for improvement. Data-driven bias training. Using anonymized recordings of actual discriminatory situations, staff would learn to identify and correct problematic behaviors. True Gate feedback system. a new app allowing passengers to provide real-time feedback about their experience displayed on large screens visible to all. Role reversal training staff would assume the role of discriminated against passengers in role-playing exercises developing empathy. Aviation Equality Certification. A new industry standard requiring all airlines operating at Harrison to meet a certain threshold of customer experience. This isn't about shaming individuals, Amara emphasized. It's about creating structures that promote the behavior we want to see and make discriminatory actions impossible to hide or justify. Richard Sterling, representing Summit Airlines, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. The financial implications of this program are significant, Amara finished for him. But so are the costs of the current system. Every complaint costs an average of 27 minutes of staff time. Customer service issues lead to missed connections, which create operational disruptions. Negative experiences drive passengers to choose other airports or airlines. She clicked to another slide showing a cost-benefit analysis. Our conservative estimate shows a return on investment within 18 months, not counting the incalculable benefit of improved reputation and customer loyalty. The head of security raised his hand. Director Vance, while I support the intention, I'm concerned about potential conflicts with security protocols. A valid concern, Amara acknowledged. Which is why Officer Dunn has been appointed to lead the integration of these initiatives with security operations. All eyes turned to Dunn, who stood up from his seat at the side of the room. My team has already begun reviewing how we can maintain rigorous security while ensuring respectful treatment for all passengers. These goals aren't in opposition. They reinforce each other. For the next 3 hours, the group dissected each component of the initiative, raising concerns, suggesting modifications, and gradually coming to see that this wasn't just an idealistic vision, but a practical, implementable plan with clear metrics for success. By the end of the meeting, each department had assigned team members to the Gate B12 task force and committed to implementation timelines. As the executives filed out, Richard Sterling lingered. Amara, he said, once they were alone. Summit Airlines would like to go beyond participation. We want to be the first airline to fully integrate these changes into our own training and policies. Amara raised an eyebrow. That's a significant commitment, Richard. It's the right thing to do, he replied. But I'd like to add one condition. I want Gary Price included in the training materials, not as an example of bad ethics, but as a business case study on the cost of contempt. Amara considered this for a moment, then nodded. I think that's appropriate. This isn't about villainizing one person. It's about learning from a failure of culture. Implementation began immediately. The physical transformation of Harrison International was the most visible change. New signage appeared throughout the terminals, emphasizing respect and inclusion. The TrueGate feedback kiosks were installed at every gate, their screens displaying real-time passenger satisfaction metrics with color-coded dots moving across airport maps, green for positive, red for negative. In Terminal B, a special display was erected near Gate B12 itself. It didn't explicitly mention the incident, but instead showcased a timeline of aviation history highlighting how air travel had evolved from an exclusive luxury for the privileged few to a global connector for people of all backgrounds. The final panel posed a question to passengers: who deserves to fly with dignity? The answer printed below in multiple languages: everyone. The training programs were more challenging to implement. Some longtime staff resisted seeing the initiative as an overreaction to a single incident or as an implicit accusation of bias. Others embraced it enthusiastically, relieved that issues they had noticed for years were finally being addressed. Officer Dunn emerged as an unexpected but effective leader in the transformation. His honest acknowledgement that he had initially defaulted to believing the gate agent rather than the passenger resonated with security personnel. We're trained to look for threats, he explained during a training session, but we need to be careful that our definition of threatening isn't influenced by biases we don't even recognize in ourselves. The mystery passenger program proved particularly eye-opening. Executives who had always used priority lanes and VIP entrances were shocked by the experience of navigating the airport as ordinary travelers. The head of facilities, after spending 45 minutes in a crowded restroom line, immediately approved budget for additional facilities. The dining services manager, unable to find affordable food options during his assessment, launched a review of concession pricing. 3 months into the initiative, the data began to show measurable improvements. Passenger complaints had decreased by 40%. Average wait times at security checkpoints had dropped by 22%. Customer satisfaction ratings on travel platforms had risen from a mediocre 3.2 stars to an impressive 4.6. Airlines took notice. First the smaller partners, then the major carriers. United sent a delegation to learn from the program. Delta hired a former member of the Gate B12 team. American Airlines began developing their own program, tentatively called the Vance Initiative, a silent acknowledgement of where the reform had originated. The International Air Transport Association, IATA, wrote about Harrison as a model for airports worldwide. Harvard Business Review published a case study on how a moment of truth could transform corporate culture. But perhaps the most significant validation came from the passengers themselves. Frequent flyers began to notice the difference in staff attitude. More eye contact, more genuine efforts to solve problems, less rigid adherence to policies that didn't serve passengers' needs. The young black mother who had spoken to Amara during the incident returned to Harrison for a flight 6 months later. She approached a customer service desk with trepidation, expecting the same dismissive treatment she had experienced in the past. Instead, she found a staff member who listened attentively to her concern about seating with her toddler, then spent 10 minutes rearranging the flight manifest to ensure she had appropriate accommodation. When she thanked him profusely, the agent smiled and gestured to his badge, which now bore a small B12 pin alongside his name tag. "We're trying to be better," he said simply. "Every passenger, every day." Meanwhile, the consequences for Gary Price continued to unfold. After his termination from Summit Airlines, he discovered that his reputation had preceded him to every job application. The video had made him unemployable in the aviation industry. Interviews would go well until the moment of recognition. "Aren't you the gate agent who—" And then the subtle shift in tone, the abbreviated questions, the swift conclusion. His wife, Jennifer, had initially stood by him, believing his protestations that he was being unfairly punished for following protocol. But as weeks passed and she watched him refuse to acknowledge any wrongdoing, continuing to blame the system or political correctness gone mad, the distance between them grew. 2 months after the incident, she left, leaving a note that read simply, "You still don't see what's wrong. I can't help you see it if you won't look." Gary's financial situation deteriorated rapidly. His savings, adequate for a temporary setback but not for prolonged unemployment, began to dwindle. He was forced to sell his car, then move from his comfortable suburban apartment to a studio on the outskirts of the city. He began to avoid friends and family, embarrassed by his circumstances, angry at what he perceived as abandonment. The rage that had initially sustained him, a righteous indignation at being made a scapegoat, gradually gave way to a deeper, more crushing despair. One day, wandering through a convenience store, he saw Amara Vance's face on the cover of a business magazine. The headline read, "How One Moment Changed an Airport." For the first time, he stopped and read the article. It wasn't what he expected. It didn't vilify him as the villain of the story. In fact, he was mentioned only briefly, not even by name, as the gate agent whose actions revealed a larger problem. The article instead focused on the structural changes Harrison International had implemented, the measurable improvements in passenger experience, the spreading impact across the aviation industry. Something shifted in Gary as he read. The article wasn't about him. It wasn't even really about Amara Vance. It was about creating a more humane system for everyone. For the first time, he allowed himself to consider that maybe, just maybe, he had been wrong. not just in his treatment of Amara, but in his entire approach to his job and the people he encountered there. 1 year after the Gate B12 incident, Harrison International Airport had transformed in ways both visible and invisible. The physical space had changed. New signage, redesigned waiting areas with more comfortable seating, improved bathroom facilities, and the TrueGate feedback screens that had become a signature feature of the airport. But the most profound change was in the atmosphere, the intangible sense of how the space felt to those moving through it. Amara Vance, now firmly established in her role as executive director, had made it a practice to regularly walk the terminals in casual clothing, observing operations from a passenger's perspective. Today, she wore a dark blue hoodie with a baseball cap pulled low, deliberately echoing her appearance from that fateful night a year ago. She stood at a distance from Gate B12, watching as the London flight SA771 entered its final boarding stages. A new gate agent, a young man named Leo Jenkins, was managing the podium. He was efficient, polite, and completely unremarkable, which in Amara's eyes made him perfect. Leo had been one of the first graduates of Harrison's new service academy established as part of the Gate B12 Initiative. He had previously been an unemployed bank teller before Amara's Second Chance program recruited people looking for career changes to work at the airport. His training had included a week playing the role of various passengers, traveling with oversized luggage with energetic children with special needs, to truly understand the experience from the passenger's perspective. As Amara watched a young man in his early 20s ran up to the podium, frantic. Please, I'm on this flight. My app just crashed. I can't get my boarding pass." He was panicked, sweating, clutching his phone, which showed a spinning loading wheel. Amara tensed. This was the stress point, the moment of truth. This was when a Gary Price would have seen a problem, a disorganized, non-compliant kid trying to scam his way on. An older man in the dwindling line huffed, "Oh, come on, kid. Get your life together. You're holding everyone up." Leo didn't even glance at the older man. He focused his full, calm attention on the student. "No problem, sir. It happens. Let's not worry about the app. What's your name, Robert?" "Robert Paulson." Robert Leo said, his fingers flying across the keyboard. "I see you right here. Seat 34F. You're checked in and good to go. The system knows you're here. Don't even worry about the app." He quickly printed a fresh, crisp cardstock boarding pass. "Here you go. You've got plenty of time. Just take a breath. We'll get you home." The young man looked like he might cry with relief. "Thank you, man. Thank you so much. I thought I was going to miss it." "We've got you," Leo said with a smile. "Have a great flight." The older man in line grumbled something about coddling, but Leo just looked at him, his smile unwavering, and said, "Next, sir." Amara watched the exchange, a profound, quiet satisfaction settling in her chest. This was the victory. Not the viral videos or the firing or even the industry awards. It was this, the absence of cruelty, the silence where Gary's yelling would have been. It was a young agent trained in the new culture, choosing empathy over power service, over contempt. She pulled the brim of her cap lower, a small smile playing on her lips, and turned to walk toward her own gate. She was flying to Chicago in coach on a ticket she'd purchased that morning. She was once again just a woman in a hoodie heading for her flight. And for the first time in a long time, she knew with absolute certainty that in her airport, that was all she needed to be. But what of Gary Price, the man whose actions had inadvertently catalyzed all this change? His journey had been more complex than most people knew. After months of unemployment and increasing desperation, he had reached a breaking point. The savings were gone. The apartment was facing eviction, and his pride had finally crumbled enough for him to apply to the very program born from his disgrace, the Second Chance Initiative at Harrison International. Using his birth name, Gerald Prisak, he had submitted an application stating only that he was a former airline employee seeking a new opportunity. He had been honest about everything else. To his shock, he received a call for an interview. He arrived wearing the only decent shirt left in his wardrobe, sweating with anxiety. "You're Gary Price," the interviewer said the moment he sat down. Not a question, a statement. Gary nodded, suddenly feeling ill. Should I go?" "No," the woman said. "Director Vance said we could meet with you. She was very specific about that." Gary blinked in surprise. "She knows I applied. She knows everything." The interviewer smiled. "That's why she's the director." Gary was offered a position with the night cleaning crew. Not a glamorous job, no fancy uniform, no power, but it was an opportunity. And as he worked the night shifts, he began to see the airport differently. He saw staff smiling. He saw passengers less stressed. And he began to understand what Amara Vance had known all along. An airport wasn't about power. It was about people. 6 months into his new role, he was assigned to clean the Gate B12 area. As he pushed his cleaning cart through the space he had once considered his kingdom, he paused and looked up at the large screen. It displayed an image of a family being helped by a young gate agent. Beneath the image were the words, "Gate B12 Initiative, serving all passengers with dignity." And for the first time, he truly understood what that meant. On a quiet Tuesday morning, as Gary was finishing his shift, a figure appeared at the end of the concourse. Even at a distance, he recognized her immediately. Amara Vance, dressed in her usual business attire, was walking directly toward him. His first instinct was to flee to avoid this confrontation he'd been dreading for a year, but something kept him rooted to the spot. Perhaps the same stubborn pride that had once been his downfall now transformed into a determination to face the consequences of his actions. "Mr. Price," Amara said as she approached, her voice neutral, neither friendly nor hostile. "Director Vance," he replied, his own voice barely above a whisper. "How are you finding your new position?" The question surprised him. It was practical, professional, devoid of the recrimination he expected. It's honest work," he answered after a moment. "Different perspective from down here." Amara nodded. "That's rather the point." An uncomfortable silence stretched between them, filled with the ambient sounds of an airport coming to life. Distant announcements, the hum of floor polishers, early passengers wheeling their luggage across the terrazzo floors. "Why did you let me come back?" Gary finally asked the question that had plagued him since his hiring. "After what I did." "The Gate B12 Initiative isn't about punishment, Mr. Price. It's about transformation. Your journey is part of that transformation." She gestured toward the terminal around them. "Look at what's happened here in a year. Passenger complaints down 67%. Staff turnover reduced by 40%. Customer satisfaction at record highs. The culture is changing, and strange as it may seem, you helped catalyze that change." Gary looked down at his hands, weathered now from months of hard physical labor. "I didn't mean to be what I was." "Few people do," Amara replied. "Systems shape us in ways we don't recognize until we're forced to see ourselves clearly. That's what happened at Gate B12, not just to you, but to all of us. We were forced to see a reality that had been there all along." She checked her watch. "I have a meeting, but I wanted you to know something. Your former wife, Jennifer, has been consulting with our training team. Her insights have been invaluable." Gary's head snapped up. "Jenny." "She's working with you. Not directly with me, but yes, with the initiative. She understands the cultural dynamics better than most. She's helping us identify the subtle ways that power corrupts in small everyday interactions." Tears pricked at Gary's eyes, unexpected and unwelcome. Is she okay?" "She's doing important work. Amara answered, neither confirming nor denying his real question. As are you in your own way. She turned to leave, then paused. There's a supervisor position opening in the maintenance department. Day shift. Better pay. I'm told you've been a model employee. You should apply. Before Gary could respond, she was walking away, her heels clicking rhythmically on the floor, her posture straight, her purpose clear. He watched her go, this woman whose dignity he had tried to strip away, who now held his future in her hands, yet treated him with the very respect he had denied her. In that moment, standing in the same terminal where everything had changed, Gary Price finally understood the most important lesson of all. Dignity wasn't something to be granted or withheld based on appearance or status. It was the fundamental right of every human being, even those who had failed to recognize it in others. The legacy of Gate B12 extended far beyond Harrison International. Within 2 years, over 50 airports across the country had implemented similar initiatives. Airlines had revamped their training programs. Industry standards had evolved to include measurable metrics for respectful treatment of all passengers. But perhaps the most profound legacy was in the countless individual interactions that never made headlines. The passengers who were seen and heard rather than judged, and dismissed the staff who found greater satisfaction in serving with dignity than controlling with authority, the subtle but significant shift from an industry that processed people to one that honored their humanity. 5 years after the incident, Amara Vance was appointed to lead the Federal Aviation Administration, bringing the principles of the Gate B12 Initiative to national aviation policy. At her confirmation hearing, she was asked what she considered her greatest professional achievement. 5 years ago at Harrison International, she replied, "We stopped asking passengers to prove they belonged and started asking ourselves if we deserved their trust." That shift in perspective changed everything. As for Gary Price, he eventually became the head of Harrison's custodial services, leading a team of 200 cleaning staff with a management style characterized by respect and humility. He never returned to the gate, never sought to reclaim his former status. But every day he walked past Gate B12, now something of an unofficial monument within the airport, and remembered the lesson he had learned at such great cost, that true power lies not in controlling others, but in serving them with dignity. And somewhere in the constant flow of humanity through Harrison International Airport, passengers moved with a little more ease, a little more confidence, a little more dignity, most never knowing the story of Gate B12, but all benefiting from its legacy. Thank you for listening to this story. What happened to Gary Price wasn't fate. It was a choice. He chose prejudice, and that choice cost him everything. Amara Vance, on the other hand, didn't just win her seat on the plane. She used that moment of ugly discrimination to change an entire culture. She proved that the best revenge isn't just getting even. It's rising up and tearing down the rotten foundation so that no one else has to suffer the same injustice. It's a powerful reminder that the person you look down on today might just be the person you answer to tomorrow. But more importantly, it reminds us that every interaction carries the potential for transformation, whether we're the one experiencing discrimination or the one witnessing it. We hope this story resonated with you. If it did, please let us know in the comments what you think the most powerful form of justice is. Don't forget to like this video, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories where the arrogant finally get what they deserve. And remember, dignity isn't earned, it's inherent. The next time you see someone being denied theirs, speak up, because change doesn't always come from those with titles. Sometimes it comes from those who simply refuse to be silenced. If you enjoyed this story of justice and transformation, please hit that like button right now. Your support helps us create more powerful content like this. Make sure you're subscribed to our channel and turn on notifications so you never miss our new uploads. Share this video with friends, family, or anyone who needs to be reminded that dignity belongs to everyone, not just those who look the part. Drop a comment below sharing a time when you witnessed discrimination and what you did about it. We read every comment and use your experiences to shape future stories. Thanks for watching, and remember, the most powerful change starts with a single voice refusing to be silenced.